we were lucky to get this ERGO project like 5.5 years ago, and it's been running for 5 years. And it's a research project on endocrine disruptors where we try to much better understand the effects of endocrine disruption on human health and on environmental species. And we try to better use all the tests we are making, industry are making, and we as scientists are making to make better use of the data. So we reduce the amount of cost and of use of animals for testing, and then to get a better knowledge on the endocrine disrupting effects of some chemicals. And we had focus on the thyroid hormone system, which is one of the important endocrine systems for all vertebrates, including humans. Vertebrates are the animals with a spinal cord, like fish and amphibians and birds and so on. Means that the effect that the chemical cause or potentially cause is on our endocrine system, which is the system including hormones, and then that this effect of the chemical is adverse, or what is in regulations are called adverse. And this means that it for human health, it can, on the individual, it will harm you, cause increased diseases, or influence your development from fetus to adult. So something like reproduction and growth and metabolism of your, the whole part. But the definition says that it should be endocrine mediated, which means that it should affect the hormone system somehow, and then that will, as an effect of this, harm you on, for example, reproduction or development. And that's the same for animals and humans, except that we are concerned for humans at the individual level, and for the animals in the environment, we are actually only concerned about the population. So we don't care about the single fish, we care about the fish population. So there's a little bit difference there. I started studying biology in the early 90s, many years ago, and there endocrine disruption was like a new field in toxicology and ecotoxicology. I'm a biologist, so I'm more concerned about the animals in the wildlife than I am for humans. We have all the nice doctors to be concerned about human health, but as we have the same hormone system, more or less the same system, fish, amphibians, birds, and humans and mammals, why not use what we get out of all our research to use that to improve the health of both for humans and for the environment? So I got interested in the mid-90s, I think, when I started to do my master, and it was a new field with estrogenic effect seen in the UK rivers, and alligators in the US changed behavior and reproduction. And this field just started to evolve. So actually, I've grown up with the field from my very early career and then until now, like 30 years later. Yeah, actually, I'm a quite weird researcher. I've been a little bit out visiting other universities, but I've been based in Odense in Denmark ever since the mid-90s. But I have a very large network globally, which I think compensate for not been traveling that much. Or actually, I have been traveling, but not been moving that much around. Have our ecotox group, as we call it, with around 15 people, technicians, PhD students, fellow professors, and we have a very strong team on ED. And I think I can say for the environment, we are probably the biggest group in Danish research on this, and have a very strong network also with the medical doctors at the hospitals and the toxicologists working on the human health, mostly using rodents as models, where we use fish, amphibians, invertebrates also. Yeah, now because I've been in the business for so many years, I also have a lot of contacts, and then especially Denmark, but also other EU countries have focused a lot on supporting better testing of chemicals for endocrine disruption. Because when I started, there were no tests because it was a new field, so you couldn't test a chemical to see if it had these endocrine effects. So most of my research have started as basic research, and then it turned into more applied research where we have gone through the Danish Environmental Protection Agency with projects, and then to OECD that are now, they are like the organization that controls the development of these standardized tests that you use for testing chemicals, not just for ED, but for all type of tests. So the EU legislations are more or less EU chemical legislations. How to prove the safety of chemicals is bound to these OECD test guidelines. Now, I'm probably a bit biased, but I agree with you that we should put more research into this, because if you look at the consumer products, I think in the EU we have, if we talk like industrial chemicals that are in everyday products, there are more than 20,000 registered just at European level in this legislation called REACH that covers all these industrial chemicals. And my guess is that we haven't tested 10% of them for endocrine effects, not just thyroid, but in general. So there's so many chemicals out there that we haven't had the time to test yet. All the resources, all the correct tests. We are working now on the thyroid hormone system, and for example, you have some quite okay test for mammalian that covers the human health part, still with some major gaps. But there is, for example, fish we use as like a model for a lot of the environmental animals species. There's no test still for this, and we have worked on it in ERGO, and we are getting there. We are in OECD now and try to standardize these tests. But otherwise, it's only been in amphibians where you could do it, which then require that you test on amphibians. And normally in EU, you mostly test on fish if you test chemicals. So it's extra testing if you have to include the amphibians. The thyroid hormone system is one of the very important hormone systems or endocrine systems for all vertebrates. So mammals like humans and also fish and amphibians. And it is crucial in the early development. So in what we call, or you can say, the development of the neural system, including the brain. And it has been published and proven in humans, for example, that if the mother doesn't have the correct thyroid hormone levels during pregnancy, if she has too little, then the IQ of the child born will be lower than average. And if she has too high thyroid hormone levels, it will also be lower the IQ if you test at a level of 8 years or 10 years old children. So it's really, really crucial that you don't disturb this system. Normally, nature controls it within these borders that are important, but chemicals can push this to both sides. So it can really, for human health, it will affect especially brain development or neural development. It can also be linked to some of the neural diseases. I don't remember all the letters of these ADHD and so on. So it's very important, but also for environment, it's crucial. For the reason why you have used amphibians before is that when they undergo what is called metamorphosis from tadpole to frog, that is totally controlled by thyroid hormones. So if they are not functioning, then the tadpole will not develop into a frog. Or if there's too much, it will develop way too fast into a frog without being real developed. So it'll be a bad frog or a frog with very bad survival chances. And in fish, for example, it's the same. It causes, it helps the swim bladder to inflate in a lot of fish, which means they can swim without using a lot of energy. And if they don't inflate the swim bladder, they will not survive in environment. It's also very important for eye development in all vertebrates, both humans and fish and amphibians. So we look into effects of different chemicals on the development of the eye. And it's not because the thyroid hormone system is not important for us as adults, because it's, for example, metabolism, but it's crucial for development and it's irreversible. If your brain is not developed correct, you're done. It won't improve what you miss here. And so therefore we have looked a lot into the early life stages of fish and amphibians, also in mice, and compare and discuss it with the doctors working on humans and with the toxicologists working on the other rodent models. So we get the best way of testing chemicals to get rid of those that actually are dangerous for the thyroid hormone system. Of course, it's very difficult to say that if a swim bladder is not inflating in a fish, then the brain in a human will not develop correctly. But for sure, it looks like, because all the processes in the thyroid hormone system, like the enzymes that are making the hormones, the transport proteins that are transporting hormones from where it's produced in the thyroid gland into the organs where it needs to work, these transport proteins are also more or less the same. So at least it raises a strong concern if we see something in a fish or amphibian, that this will also happen, or some effects will happen in mammals, including humans. And also the other way around, if you see an effect in rodents, for example, they use as model for humans, then we should also be concerned for environmental species. Of course, rodents are also in the environment, so it will automatically make concern for rodents in the environment, but also for other types of animal classes. No, I won't say that there's a lot of animal testing. There is animal testing involved, and I know it can be controversial, but the alternative is to expose all the environmental animals to these chemicals without taking care if they actually make harm. So we are doing animal testing. We try to reduce it as much as possible, and we try to go from higher vertebrates to lower vertebrates. So we as humans think it's maybe more ethical, correct, to test on a very young zebrafish than on a beagle dog. That is just the way people are thinking. Or from a rat to a fish is like improving the testing. If you can live with just testing on a fish, it's better than also testing on mammals. That's the plan. For example, if we can get fish are tested anyway in the regulatory system in EU to approve chemicals. It's a bit dependent on chemicals can be like low tonnage, where you only produce or import a few tons in EU per year. Then you don't require a lot of testing because you don't expect to be exposed to these chemicals because the amount is so small. But we have a lot of what we call high tonnage chemicals that is defined as more than 100 tons in EU per year. And it doesn't matter if it's produced or it's imported. That's the same requirements for the companies doing it. They have to do some certain testing. Part of this standard test requirements in several legislations where amphibians are only required for pesticides and biocides that are like made toxic by purpose. So they have a very, comprehensive testing system, but otherwise it's fish. And as long as we don't have these thyroid sensitive endpoints in fish, you need also to test in amphibians if you have a concern. So if you get trust in these endpoints we put into the fish, then you can avoid double testing. And also one I want to say, now we talk about OECD, one of the major advantages of putting these tests into OECD is that when they are accepted in OECD, they are accepted globally. And this means that if we make a test in Denmark or in Germany or in the UK or in France, they don't repeat it in Japan or in the US. So you save a lot of animals by having agreed on this test. validation is long. There is veto right for everything, so the process is very long. But when you have the test, you save, I think it's estimated, you save around 200-300 million euros a year on testing, and I don't know, thousands and thousands of animals by using these standardized tests. So that's one of the major advantages of developing these guidelines. Or we don't want to lower the number of testing, but the testing on higher vertebrates, because there's also a lot of in vitro assays, so cell-based assays where you can clone and do so many different things with different cell types that you can reduce the need for what we call in vivo testing, so testing on live animals. So in the long run, we want to get totally away from using higher vertebrates as a test organism. But we are not there yet if we want to protect human health and the environment. So it's always a balance between protection against the chemicals and reduction of experimental animals. But again, comparing experimental animals, for example, the fish we use less fish a year in Europe on all testing of chemicals than I think one Danish fishing ship is catching of fish for pig food. So you also need to balance what amount we use. It is a lot of fish. Sorry. It is a lot of fish, but comparing to industrial fishing, where you suffocate trillions of fish, this is nothing compared. So I still think I can defend to do animal testing because I want to protect environmental species. Yeah, and of course, no one wants to harm any animal by adding chemicals unless you think it's necessary. It's not for fun we are doing this. It's because we want to protect environmental species. A lot of them are really under pressure these years. We don't know if it's whatever, it's climate changes or chemicals or lack of places to live, but I am quite sure it's a combination. So chemicals also have an impact on the biodiversity crisis that we would like to help solving. I think, first of all, don't go around and be scared for everything. We are surrounded by chemicals, and we've been that also before the Industrial Revolution, and we will be. Everything is actually chemicals. There's a lot of harmful natural chemicals out there from plants, and whatever, poison is everywhere. So my first advice is don't get scared. But after this, I would say, now I talked about development. It's crucial that if you have a plan to get pregnant, now I talk to both father and mother, then try to reduce what is not like needed. You can reduce cosmetics, you can eat organic, and these few things. I don't tell you that will make the total difference, but at least that's something you can do. Because if you live in a city, you can't change the air pollution. Of course, you could wear a mask, but that will probably also make some other troubles for you. So I think it's more these like small things you can do, and then you could of course be aware of what you buy. If you buy EU products made or imported by European companies, they are much more tested than, I won't mention, platforms where you can buy cheap consumer products that I guarantee has not been tested the same way. And you can also see if governments make like small samples of these products, that you find a lot of chemicals that are actually not allowed in Europe. So buy European. I think I can say that in a European project, where I don't say it's perfect, but it's better than many other places where testing is less standardized and less comprehensive. Sure, it's more to remember. But I don't think it's a funny story, but at least it's I think an interesting. We had some interesting time in EURION because the 8 projects of this EURION product or cluster, they shifted coordinating the whole EURION cluster for 18 months, 2 and 2. So when ERGO should take over this in March 2020, together with the Endpoint project, we went to Amsterdam and had this takeover from I think it was Athena and Goliath, 2 of the other projects, and we had really nice takeover. And now we should get on doing all this coordination of the 8 products. And 3 days later, the world shut down. So we just took over 3 days before at least Denmark totally shut down. So that was my last trip to Amsterdam airport to take over the role as co-coordinator of EURION. And then the world just changed, and it of course affected all our research and all our way of interacting. I think that's why we can do this now. We're used to do online interviews. We actually were not before 2020. So it was a tough one to do, but we learned a lot. And fortunately, the EURION and ERGO projects, they ran also after the lockdown. So we have been a lot together the last 3 years or so. I would say now, as I said, I've been a researcher for 30 years or so now, and I don't think it's just specifically for this field, but generally you should trust what you do. Also, if maybe some a bit older than you say that's impossible, I think you should follow your ideas and trust it, but you should also be aware that you will make mistakes, and you'll probably make bigger mistakes and smaller mistakes. And I learned that the best thing to do is to accept that you make mistakes and try to learn from them, and also be okay to share this with others, because then you gain a lot of respect in the society if you can actually admit that you're not always right. I think that's what I learned, sometimes the hard way. But I think that's the best advice I can give, that trust yourself, but still no one will go through a scientific career or any career without making mistakes. A simple fact now, the endocrine system is not simple. No, again, we should not be scared. We should, of course, support that we test our chemicals. And now I can say it's not like a suggestion, but we have a lot of collaboration with industry, because industry that produce or import the chemicals are, of course, also interested in having a harmless chemical, or no chemical is harmless. It's about the dose, but they don't want use of chemicals in a way that harm anyone. So I think there's a lot of good collaboration on the new chemicals in production, but we still have a big lack of these legacy chemicals that were developed before we had the tests. So there's a lot to do, and we are improving by using AI and all computer modeling and all this stuff. But there's still a need for many years ahead to do better testing, and both for mammalian human health in general, to improve when you do an animal test, get as much data out as possible, so you get as much out of the single animal that you sacrifice. I think that's my main, that's about the testing, at least. And then again, take care of the developing fetus and early childhood, because that's where the adversity in general will affect you. We as adults are much more tolerant to these chemicals than the fetus. Some fantastic years in this EURION cluster with I think almost 100 partners. So I can only advise scientists to apply for these large projects. It can be frustrating. The administration can be frustrating, but the network you get is fantastic. Know each other very well, and already got new projects, and will bring ERGO legacy into new projects because we have so much collaboration. So that has been fantastic.